At his $175,000 birthday party my brother took, the mic laughed into the camera and told the world I was homeless. What he didn't know, what no one knew, was that the luxury hotel he was standing in belonged to me. If you've ever been underestimated, humiliated, or forced to prove your worth in silence, this story will change the way you see quiet power forever. At 41, Marcus Bennett had built an empire in silence, not the kind that made headlines or appeared on glossy covers of luxury magazines, but the kind that shimmered quietly behind polished glass towers hidden within boardroom strategy meetings and stitched deep into the foundations of Miami's skyline. He owned Meridian Developments, a real estate powerhouse focused on high-end hotels and commercial properties along the Florida coast. From boutique beach escapes in South Beach to towering high-rises in Brickell, every brick bore the mark of Marcus's vision. And yet no one in his family knew. They still thought he was struggling. It was intentional. Marcus had always kept his distance both emotionally and geographically. He hadn't set foot in his family's home in Orlando in almost 2 years. Not because he was too busy, though he often was, but because nothing about that house ever felt like home. To Marcus, going back meant returning to a version of himself he'd long buried. The obedient older brother, the quiet son, the invisible achiever. The invitation came on a gray Wednesday afternoon, a text from his father, Conrad Bennett. "Dinner, Sunday, don't be late." No "how are you," no warmth, just the cold assumption that he'd show up. Marcus stared at the message for a long moment before locking his phone and placing it face down on his mahogany desk. The city lights from downtown Miami flickered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office. From here he could see everything he had built, a kingdom in plain sight. And still, to his family, he was a ghost in tattered jeans. His office was a study in deliberate understatement, glass, steel, and dark wood with sharp angles and smooth finishes. Abstract art lined the walls, and a sleek espresso machine hissed quietly in the corner. The space whispered wealth to those who understood it, and silence to those who didn't. He thought about ignoring the message, about continuing the quiet life he'd carved out, but something inside him, a part still tethered to boyhood hopes, whispered, "Maybe this time it will be different." Marcus sighed. He knew better. The last time he'd visited, it had been Brandon's birthday. Marcus had driven all night to surprise him, only to find his younger brother surrounded by friends, influencers, and cameras. Brandon had been the golden child since birth, charming, athletic, loud in all the right ways. He was the kind of person who made strangers lean in and family beam with pride. Marcus had never been that. Growing up, every achievement Marcus scraped together was measured against Brandon's latest triumph. If Marcus earned a scholarship, Brandon had already landed a viral campaign. If Marcus got a job, Brandon had just been flown to LA for a brand shoot. "Marcus is so serious," their mother used to say with a chuckle ruffling Brandon's hair. "You should learn to smile more like your brother." But Marcus had learned something else instead, how to endure in silence. He remembered being 13, staying up late to fix a science project while Brandon snuck out to a party. The next day, Brandon was grounded for a week, but still managed to charm his way back to favor in hours. Marcus, meanwhile, was told he should try harder to be more social. The memories were endless. Field days where his father only clapped for Brandon, family dinners where his words were met with nods but Brandon's with applause. It was as though Marcus existed in a parallel universe, always present, rarely seen. So he stopped trying to be seen. He worked, he saved, he planned, he built, and he left. In Miami, he started small, sleeping in a converted garage, fixing up rundown properties no one else wanted. He watched YouTube videos on drywall installation, negotiated with skeptical bankers, and made deals in cafes over black coffee and thick folders of projections. It wasn't glamorous. It was grit and grind. But it worked. Now he sat alone in a room that buzzed with quiet success, thumbing the rim of his coffee cup, wondering why that old familiar ache still had the power to sting. Despite the square footage, the skyline views, the polished credit ratings, there was still a part of him that hurt like the boy who never got picked first. He wasn't bitter, not exactly. But something about that text about being summoned instead of invited ignited a flicker of heat in his chest. Perhaps it was time to go back, just once more, not for them, for himself, to see clearly how far he'd come. Marcus leaned back in his chair and stared out over the glittering skyline. The moonlight caught the corner of a framed photo on his desk, him at the ribbon cutting of Meridian's first tower. A hard hat in one hand, a blueprint in the other. No family in the photo, just the team that helped him build. Strength doesn't come from avoiding pain, he thought. It comes from living through it and standing anyway. He closed his eyes for a moment, breathed deep, and then picked up his phone, typed one word in response to Conrad's message, and hit send. Okay. It was a word heavy with history, but this time it came from a place of power. The drive to Orlando was long but familiar, each passing highway sign a breadcrumb leading Marcus back to a life he had left behind. The city skyline of Miami slowly gave way to flatlands and suburban neighborhoods, and with them memories he hadn't asked to remember. By the time he turned onto his parents' quiet street, dusk had settled. The porch light of the old Bennett house flickered against beige siding and a cracked driveway. It hadn't changed a bit. Conrad Bennett opened the door before Marcus could knock. The old man stood stiffly in a pressed shirt and slacks, eyes scanning his eldest son with the same stern appraisal Marcus remembered from childhood. "You're on time," Conrad said, as if it were an achievement rather than an expectation. "You asked me to be," Marcus replied evenly. Inside, the living room smelled faintly of pine cleaner and something overcooked. His mother Lorraine was in the kitchen, moving with robotic precision as she laid out plates of food. She glanced at Marcus with a neutral expression, neither warmth nor disdain, just the resigned indifference of someone fulfilling a social obligation. "You look tired," she said, not looking up. "Are you sleeping enough?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Enough." They sat at the dinner table like strangers performing a ritual. Silence stretched between the clinks of silverware and hollow small talk about traffic and the weather. The air was dense with unsaid things. Then came Brandon. He burst in through the front door like a storm camera in hand, live stream already rolling. "Yo, what's up, fam? Guess who's back in Orlando, baby?" He beamed at the camera, his voice echoing through the house. Behind him, the front door hung open. Marcus looked up, his expression unchanged. Brandon leaned over the table and pointed his phone toward their father. "Say what's up, Dad." "Put that thing away at dinner," Conrad barked, but Brandon laughed it off. "It's for my followers," he said, finally sitting down. Then spotting Marcus. "Oh, wow. Marcus, you actually came." Marcus gave a nod. "Good to see you, Brandon." Yeah. Brandon waved dismissively, already turning the camera back on himself. "Anyway, huge news, guys. I'm throwing the biggest party Orlando's ever seen. No scratch that the biggest party Miami's ever seen. My birthday bash. We're talking red carpet, live performers, fireworks, you name it. And get this, it's gonna be at the most luxe hotel in the city." He paused for dramatic effect. "Meridian Grand." Marcus's fork froze. He blinked once, then resumed eating. "What's that?" Conrad asked. "Only the swankiest place in Miami," Brandon said. "A-list everything. Full buyout. Should run about $175K. but it's gonna be legendary. I'll finally get the attention I deserve. Lorraine nodded, still not meeting Marcus's eyes. That's a lot of money, Brandon. It's an investment in my brand, Brandon said smoothly. And you know what? He leaned in, looking right at Marcus, his grin shark-like. I figured Big Bro here would sponsor it. I mean, what else is he doing with his time down there? Marcus didn't react. Brandon's eyes gleamed. You're still in Miami, right? Probably couch surfing, crashing with friends, maybe living in your car. Come on, Marcus, let's call it what it is. You're basically homeless. The room stilled. You've got nothing to lose, Brandon added with a smirk. Help me make this party happen. Might be the only chance you get to walk through those hotel doors. Conrad chuckled. Lorraine gave a small, polite laugh. No one defended him. Marcus glanced around the table, his eyes lingering a second longer on each face. He saw no concern, no curiosity, just casual cruelty masked as dinner conversation. He set down his fork gently. Is that what you think? That I have nothing to lose? Brandon shrugged. I mean, you don't talk about what you do. You dress like a math teacher. You live like a ghost. You've always been kind of forgettable. Marcus chuckled softly, not bitter, not angry, just amused. That's one way to look at it. So you'll do it, Brandon pressed. Sponsor the party. He raised his phone again, speaking to the live stream. Guys, should Marcus fund the bash or what? Smash that like button if you think he should step up. Sure, Marcus said, standing slowly. He reached for his jacket. Whatever you think. Brandon blinked, surprised at the lack of resistance. Wait, really? Marcus just smiled. You decide. And with that, he left the table, the faintest smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Behind him, Brandon turned back to his camera, triumphant. But Marcus was already planning. He had seen enough. He remembered every word, and he knew exactly what came next. Back in Miami, Marcus drove along the palm-lined avenue that led to the headquarters of Meridian Properties. The building rose like a monument, glass steel and strength gleaming in the late morning sun. It was the crown jewel of everything he had built over the last decade, a quiet fortress shaped by focus, sacrifice, and solitude. The lobby buzzed with quiet efficiency. Staff passed with tablets and earpieces, nodding respectfully as Marcus entered. He gave curt nods in return, making his way to the executive elevator at the rear of the hall. As the doors closed behind him, he felt the tension he'd carried from Orlando begin to shift. Here he was not the forgotten son. Here he was the architect of his own destiny. When he reached the top floor, his assistant Derek was already waiting outside his office with a tablet in hand and a furrow in his brow. Morning, Mr. Bennett, Derek said. We may have a situation. Marcus raised an eyebrow and motioned for Derek to follow him inside. Hotel Grand got a full event request over the weekend, Derek continued. It came in under the name Brandon Bennett. Full buyout of the ballroom, luxury suites, entertainment riders, red carpet security. Pretty ambitious. Marcus's jaw tensed. When was it approved? Saturday, Derek said. Signed. And here's the kicker, it includes your digital signature. Confirmation from your corporate email address. Marcus froze, then extended his hand. Derek handed over the tablet. Marcus scrolled through the booking form, the digital documents, the agreement with the hotel's internal approval chain. Sure enough, the final confirmation read, approved by Marcus Bennett, CEO. He looked up. I didn't approve this. I figured as much, Derek said. But it went through. The team at the Grand's flagship property assumed it was legit. It's scheduled for next weekend. Marcus leaned back in his chair, mind racing. Brandon had forged approval, possibly with help. The signature was a near-perfect replica, and the digital trail appeared clean. Someone had studied how he operated, what systems to spoof. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't slam a fist or curse the ceiling. He simply said, "Get legal. Now." Derek was already typing. "You want to cancel it?" Marcus's gaze drifted to the city skyline beyond his office windows. "No, let it happen." Derek paused. "Sir, I want him to think he's winning." Marcus said, his voice low but sharp. "Don't touch the booking. Don't raise an alarm. But I want every record pulled, emails, access logs, voice memos, camera footage, and I want it sealed into a secure folder. Title it Brandon Fraud Evidence." Derek blinked, then nodded slowly. "Understood. And add surveillance to the ballroom next weekend. Full coverage. Every mic hot. Every entrance monitored." "What's the goal?" Derek asked. Marcus folded his hands. "To catch him red-handed. Let him boast. Let him lie. Let him build the fantasy. I want him to paint himself into a corner with no exits." Derek's voice lowered. "He called you homeless, didn't he?" Marcus didn't answer at first. Then he did. There was silence. "Want me to prep a press response just in case, no?" Marcus said, eyes never leaving the window. "This isn't about headlines. This is about letting silence become strategy." He stood and walked to his personal conference room where a framed blueprint of the Meridian Grand hung on the wall, a hotel he'd built with nothing but grit, one risk at a time. Brandon wanted the spotlight. Marcus would let him have it. And when the lights burned brightest, the truth would cast the longest shadow. The Meridian Grand shimmered like a diamond under the Miami night sky. Spotlights danced across the marble columns at the entrance. Black cars lined the curb. Inside the ballroom pulsed with champagne and ego. Gold-draped tables, aerial performers, and a 10-piece band filled the air with noise, glamour, and curated chaos. The air smelled of imported roses and ambition. Brandon Bennett stood at the center of it all. He wore a tailored white tuxedo with a velvet bow tie and a grin wide enough to swallow the room. Guests swirled around him, Instagram models, influencers, tech investors, a few C-list celebrities, all sipping gold-rimmed cocktails and nodding approvingly at the spectacle, the theme of the night, royal ascension. And Brandon played his part to perfection. Every detail screamed opulence. Ice sculptures glistened beside chocolate fountains. Waiters in white gloves weaved between guests with trays of oysters, foie gras, and custom cocktails named after Brandon himself. The LED screen behind the stage showed a loop of Brandon's social media highlights. Lavish trips, branded partnerships, and filtered perfection. Each post was more extravagant than the last. Across the hotel in the security control room, Marcus watched silently. Cameras covered every angle of the ballroom. His eyes flicked from one screen to the next. Derek stood beside him, arms crossed. "He really went all out," Derek muttered. Marcus said nothing. He simply reached forward and tapped the red Rex button. Every screen began recording. Marcus's fingers hovered over the desk still. A small smile tugged at the corner of his lips, not of joy, but of clarity. He had seen enough. Guests began to whisper about Brandon's absence from the floor. Moments later, Brandon grabbed a mic and jumped on stage as the music dimmed. "Ladies and gentlemen," Brandon beamed, spinning in a dramatic flourish. "What a night, huh? Let's give it up for luxury, for legacy, for living large." The crowd erupted in cheers. He held up a flute of champagne. "You know it's funny. When I told my family I wanted to do this, they laughed. Said I was dreaming too big. Said I didn't have what it takes." He paused. "Well, I guess I proved them wrong." Applause rolled again. Brandon leaned forward, his tone dropping. "And speaking of family, can we take a moment to shout out my brother Marcus?" A spotlight swept the crowd. Cameras turned. Marcus remained out of view. His image never touched the floor. Brandon continued laughing. "I mean, who knew the guy was still alive? Last I heard he was down here in Miami, couch surfing, squatting, whatever he could manage." Scattered laughter. He's basically homeless, folks, Brandon added, laughing. But don't worry, I made sure he got an invite tonight. You know, just in case he needed a warm place to sleep. Louder laughter. Phones recorded, live comments streamed in like wildfire. Is this for real? LOL savage. Marcus is here where? In the control room, Marcus's expression didn't shift. His hand hovered over the mouse, tagging timestamps on the footage. At 00:17:42, Brandon labels his brother homeless. At 00:18:05 implies vagrancy. He clicked save. Brandon grinned, basking in the spotlight. And hey, it's the least I can do, right? He technically paid for all this. Laughter turned to cheers. Without his generosity, Brandon added, air quoting the word, none of this would be possible. So let's raise a glass to the guy who can't afford his own pillow but still managed to fund a dream. Marcus pressed pause. Silence filled the control room. Derek turned slowly. He really thinks you're doing nothing. No, Marcus said, finally speaking. He thinks I'm no one. They stood in the dim light of the monitors, the digital reflection of the party flickering like firelight on Marcus's face. Behind him, the hum of machinery and muted cheers from the ballroom painted a strange contrast. He lit the match, Marcus said softly. I'm just letting it burn. And with that, he began building his firebreak. The morning after the party, the Miami skyline stretched outside Marcus's window, all steel and reflection. He sipped his black coffee in silence, the echoes of laughter from the previous night still buzzing faintly in his memory, not from joy, but from farce. Derek stepped into the office holding a tablet. He did it again, he said flatly. Marcus looked up, one brow raised. Brandon posted a thank you note on all platforms, Instagram, Facebook, even TikTok. Hashtagged it, #thanks Marcus, my big night. Derek handed over the tablet. He's implying you funded the whole thing, again, but this time directly. Marcus scrolled slowly. The post read, massive gratitude to my brother Marcus Bennett for making all of this possible. Couldn't have done it without you. Family means everything. A picture of Brandon posing dramatically under the Meridian Grand logo accompanied the message. Derek crossed his arms. He's sealing the illusion now. Marcus set the tablet down. Perfect. He opened his laptop and typed quickly. An email to his legal team. Begin formal review of all event documents under Brandon Bennett's name. Include forged authorizations, impersonation, and damages related to misrepresentation. He attached clips from the live stream. Then another to his public relations lead, schedule a crisis comms session. We're reframing the narrative. Lastly, he drafted a third message to his media advisor. Prepare a controlled statement about Meridian's commitment to ethical use of property and transparency. I'll approve the final version. Derek watched. You're not going public with anger. Marcus looked at him. No, I'm going public with structure. There was power and precision. Fury fades. Paperwork lasts. Later that afternoon, the PR team filed into the conference room. Slide decks displayed timelines, screenshots, digital footprints, and follower engagement charts. Marcus stood at the head of the table, calm, centered. We're not out to shame Brandon, he began. We're going to let the facts speak. This is about identity, about ownership. We are custodians of a truth he tried to twist. A younger analyst raised a concern. Won't going public affect your image too, Marcus? Won't people wonder why you stayed silent for so long? Marcus met her gaze. Let them. Sometimes silence speaks, sometimes it listens, and sometimes it builds. He outlined the next steps, a statement to be posted on Meridian's official channels clarifying no internal approval was given for the event. A soft yet pointed correction backed by logs, contracts, and timestamps. Frame it like a lesson, Marcus instructed. A reminder to influencers that public spaces come with private rules. As the meeting concluded, Derek leaned in. "You're rewriting the narrative without even raising your voice." Marcus nodded, glancing out the window. He made noise. "I make consequences." By evening, the statement went live. Meridian Properties confirms that no formal authorization was granted to Mr. Brandon Bennett for his private event at our Miami Grand location. All activities and costs related to said event remain the responsibility of the client. We stand for integrity in partnership and trust in transparency. The post was measured professional and unmistakably sharp. Within hours, media outlets picked it up. Hashtags began to shift. Hashtag family fraud trended briefly. Commenters speculated. Former collaborators of Brandon's began asking questions. Screenshots of Brandon's live stream comments were reposted and dissected. Someone even found footage of Brandon mocking Marcus and looped it with the statement from Meridian. "I used to follow Brandon," one commenter posted, "but this is just toxic." Major respect to Marcus for keeping it classy. Marcus didn't watch it unfold in real time. He didn't need to. His phone buzzed once, a message from a news anchor he respected. "Want to share your side? We're running a feature on personal legacy versus public persona." He stared at the screen for a moment, then locked it. He walked to the window, staring out over the city that had once swallowed him whole and now stood beneath his name. Some truths don't need to be told. They just need to be seen. And Marcus was done being invisible. But the war of perception was just beginning. Over the next 24 hours, Meridian's inbox was flooded. Investors demanded clarity. Partners wanted reassurances. Brandon's followers split in opinion. Some defended him, others distanced. Marcus convened another meeting, this time with legal counsel in attendance. "We'll file an official cease and desist," his lead counsel advised. "Add a public clarification in case Brandon tries another post." Marcus agreed. The message had to be firm but not vindictive. The next day, a new piece ran on a popular online magazine, "When Influence Overreaches, the Brandon Bennett Debacle." It painted Marcus as the composed strategist, Brandon as the reckless pretender. There was no interview, just well-placed facts. That night, Marcus walked through the Meridian Grand's now empty ballroom. The echoes of Brandon's voice, once cruel and loud, had faded. The silence felt like justice, a silent kind. In one quiet moment, Marcus remembered being 16, watching Brandon win yet another trophy their parents cheered for. Back then, he turned away. Now he stood in the very building he owned, rewriting what family legacy meant. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like the shadow. He felt like the sun. The hum of the Meridian Tower was constant, distant chatter from the lobby, muffled footsteps on marble. The subdued clinking of coffee cups in corner lounges. Marcus stood by the window in his office, gaze cast over the Miami skyline. The sunlight refracted off the glass towers like truth breaking through illusion. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Bennett," came the receptionist's voice, hesitant. "Your father, Conrad Bennett, he's here. No appointment." Marcus froze, jaw tightening. It had been over a year since he last saw his father, and never had Conrad stepped foot into Marcus's domain. This wasn't a courtesy visit. It was strategy. "Send him up," Marcus said simply. When the door opened, Conrad entered like he still owned the rooms he walked into. Tall, trim-pressed shirt under a tan blazer, polished shoes that clicked across the floor. He didn't offer a smile. "Marcus," he said, nodding once. "Conrad," Marcus replied coolly, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Conrad didn't sit immediately. He surveyed the office, eyes scanning the skyline view, the plaques on the wall, the soft leather finishes. Then he finally sat, posture rigid. You've built quite the empire, he said. Impressive. I know, Marcus said. A pause. Then Conrad pulled a folder from his coat. It was the same one Brandon's assistant had sent days earlier, the forged contract with Marcus's name. Let's end this, Conrad said, sliding the folder across the desk. Sign it, make it formal, support Brandon's expenses, quiet the press. Let's move forward as a family. Marcus didn't touch the folder. You came all this way to clean up Brandon's mess. This isn't just about Brandon, Conrad snapped. This is about keeping our family's name intact. The media's circling. People are talking. You've made it worse. No, Marcus replied. I made it clear there's a difference. Conrad's voice lowered, a simmering threat beneath forced calm. You want revenge, fine, but don't forget we gave you a home. We raised you. Marcus finally opened the folder, slowly, eyes scanning the clauses. Then he turned it around and tapped a highlighted section. Forgery, digital impersonation. If I sign this, I validate a lie. I won't. Don't make this bigger than it has to be, Conrad said, the polished tone fading. Brandon is young. He got excited. You're the older brother. Take the high road. I've lived on the high road my whole life, Marcus said, voice calm but cold. And all it got me was distance. Conrad's face hardened. You're being selfish, cold, unforgiving. That's not how this family survives. Marcus leaned back, eyes steady. You mean that's not how this family controls? Conrad stood abruptly. You always needed to be different, always needed to prove something. I needed to be seen, Marcus replied. But I stopped trying when I realized you only look where you expect greatness, not where it's earned. Conrad clenched the folder in his hand. You'll regret this. Families don't win by division. Marcus stood too, face to face now, the sun no longer in shadow. I'm not dividing anything. I'm protecting what I built, and I'm done paying to be accepted. The silence stretched between them like a drawn bow. Conrad's jaw tightened. He gave a stiff nod and turned toward the door. Don't expect a second chance. I never got a first, Marcus replied quietly. As the door shut, Marcus exhaled slowly. Derek entered moments later, sensing the storm. He came to pressure you, Derek asked. He came to remind me who they think I should be, Marcus said, returning to his desk. Derek nodded. And who are you? Marcus looked out the window, the city glinting like opportunity. Someone they never saw coming. And with that, he reopened his laptop, adding a new file to the Brandon case folder, family coercion meeting transcript. Because this wasn't just personal anymore. It was legacy. And Marcus had no intention of surrendering his. The ballroom of the downtown Hilton shimmered with artificial elegance, LED panels, glowing champagne, flowing camera drones circling overhead. Brandon Bennett stood under a silver archway that spelled out, Meridian X Brandon, the future of lifestyle. The press had gathered. Influencers milled around, cameras ready. Brandon was radiant in a white tuxedo jacket, oozing confidence as he adjusted his lapel mic. Behind him, a massive screen looped a slick promo video showcasing glamorous shots of Meridian properties narrated in Brandon's voice. He took the stage. Good evening, everyone, Brandon began, voice smooth. Tonight I unveil a new era, an exclusive collaboration with one of the most iconic hospitality brands, Meridian Properties. And it wouldn't have happened without one person, my incredible brother Marcus Bennett. There were gasps, flashes, applause. Brandon gestured grandly. Marcus made this possible. He believed in the vision, and I'm proud to call him my biggest supporter. At that exact moment, the double doors at the back of the ballroom opened. Marcus walked in. The room fell to whispers as he strode down the aisle, dark suit, calm face, a presence unmistakably in control. He didn't head to the stage but to a mic stand set up off to the side. Brandon's smile faltered. Marcus adjusted the mic. "Thank you, Brandon, for the introduction," he said, his voice resonating clearly. "But I need to clarify a few things." Brandon stiffened. "Marcus, this isn't—" "I am Marcus Bennett," he continued, "founder, CEO, and sole owner of Meridian Properties. There is no collaboration, there is no agreement, and most importantly, there was no approval." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Marcus pulled out a tablet connected to the large screen behind Brandon. With a single tap, footage from Brandon's party played: the mocking speech, the forged documents, the posts implying sponsorship. Then a screen with Marcus's legal team logo, notice unauthorized use of corporate identity under investigation. Marcus looked at the audience. "I will not pursue legal action for now, but let the record show I do not forget, and I will not be used." He stepped back. The silence was deafening. Brandon stammered, It was a misunderstanding." But the reporters had already turned, shouting questions, flashes popping. The sponsor's reps stepped away, whispering to assistants. Within moments, phones buzzed with breaking alerts: influencer Brandon Bennett exposed by CEO brother in live confrontation. Marcus stayed composed as he walked out. Derek met him at the lobby exit. "You didn't have to go public," Derek said. "I did," Marcus replied. "Not for revenge, for truth." By the next morning, headlines ran with words like fraud, scandal, and deception. Brandon's sponsors dropped him one by one. His online following took a nosedive. Comment sections were filled with memes and backlash. His brand, once built on illusion, was now buried under reality. Marcus, meanwhile, returned to his office. The Meridian name was safe. His silence had spoken louder than Brandon's boasts. He wasn't just defending his empire, he was reclaiming his story, because sometimes the greatest twist doesn't need drama. Just honesty. The storm had passed, but the silence it left behind echoed louder than any scandal. Marcus sat alone in his office, the city glittering beneath him, distant and hushed. The press had moved on. Brandon had disappeared from public life. And the Bennett family name, though bruised, remained intact. But Marcus had made a quiet decision. He drafted the final set of documents himself. No assistants, no legal intermediaries. With one signature, he withdrew from every shared asset tied to the Bennett family. Real estate residual trusts, shared offshore accounts, he relinquished them all. Not out of anger, but resolve. With the next set of signatures, he transferred his portion of the family inheritance to the Horizon Children's Fund, a charity focused on giving shelter and education to kids from broken homes. Because Marcus knew too well what it meant to feel homeless while still living under a roof. He didn't tell anyone. No press release, no announcement, just action, quiet and complete. That evening, Marcus sat at his writing desk, a walnut antique piece his mother once admired, and picked up a pen. For the first time in years, he wrote a letter, not for courtrooms or contracts, but for himself. "Dear Conrad, Lorraine, and Brandon, I once thought all I wanted was to be needed. Then I believed I wanted to be respected. But deep down, what I truly wanted was simple: to be loved without condition, not used out of convenience. I don't hate you. But I've stopped waiting for your approval to define me. I've stopped confusing silence with strength and validation with love. I forgive you. But more importantly, I forgive myself for every time I bent, every time I shrank, every time I hoped when I should have walked away. This letter won't be sent, not because you don't deserve to read it, but because I no longer need you to understand it for it to be true. Marcus." He folded the letter, slid it into an unmarked envelope, and tucked it into the back of his drawer. It wasn't for them. It was for him. Days later, he received a message his mother, Lorraine, wished to meet. They met at a quiet cafe off the bay where the sun softened the lines of age and regret. She looked older, smaller somehow, not the distant matriarch he remembered, but a woman with weathered eyes and careful words. "I saw your interview," she said, hands clasped around a teacup. "And I saw everything else." Marcus didn't reply. Lorraine inhaled. "I never told you I was proud of you. And that's my fault. I let your father decide how we treated you. I thought I was keeping peace. But I see now I just watched you burn quietly. I'm sorry." Her voice cracked. No fanfare, no dramatic pause, just truth fragile and late. Marcus looked at her. The years of silence, of absence, of aching for a mother's warmth that never arrived, all of it pulsed in that moment. He didn't speak. He just nodded. And in that nod there was everything: acknowledgement, grace, release. When they stood to part, she reached out. Not to hug him, but simply to touch his arm gently. And for the first time since he was a child, Marcus let her. That night, Marcus returned home and lit a candle on the balcony. He stared at the flame as it danced in the breeze, fragile but persistent. Forgiveness, he realized, didn't always come with a dramatic confrontation. Sometimes it looked like walking away from a fight you could win. Sometimes it looked like slints, like a nod, like lighting a candle no one else would see. Because not all healing needed an audience. And sometimes the art of letting go wasn't about losing. It was the quietest victory of all. The morning breeze in Manhattan held a different kind of promise. Marcus Bennett stood before the towering glass facade of Meridian Properties' new East Coast headquarters. A sleek marvel nestled on Fifth Avenue, bathed in the golden hush of a New York sunrise. It had been 6 months since the fallout in Miami. 6 months since Brandon's empire of illusion had crumbled and Marcus had quietly withdrawn from the entanglements of his past. Now a new chapter had begun. Inside the grand atrium of the new building, polished stone reflected sunlit lights and purposeful footsteps. The air was thick with energy, not from chaos, but from intention. Marcus walked through the entrance, flanked by staff who nodded respectfully. For the first time in his career, he was no longer the shadow behind the empire. He was its face. "You have 10 minutes before we head to the TEDx venue," Derek said, entering with a tablet in hand. "Your final remarks are loaded. Want to review them again?" Marcus shook his head. "No, I think this one has to come from me." Derek grinned. "So the man of silence finally speaks." "I'm not stepping into the light," Marcus replied with a soft smile. "I'm just done pretending the light wasn't already mine." The TEDx venue buzzed with anticipation. Marcus stood backstage, his notes untouched. He watched the audience, a sea of strangers and sympathizers. Executives, entrepreneurs, young professionals. Not one of them knew his full story. And that was the point. He wasn't there to relive the drama. He was there to rewrite the narrative. When it was his turn, he stepped onto the red dot at center stage. No PowerPoint, no flashy graphics. Just Marcus, a simple mic, and a room that leaned in. "They used to call me invisible," he began, "and I let them because I thought disappearing was safer than being misunderstood." He shared pieces of the journey without name-dropping, without revenge. Just quiet truths, the weight of silence in a loud family, the pain of being useful but not loved. The strength it took to build in the shadows. "I was called homeless on a live stream," he said calmly. "The truth is I was never without a home. I just hadn't built one I could be seen in." The room fell into stillness, a kind of reverence that came not from pity but from recognition. "Success," Marcus continued, "isn't a finish line. It's the moment you realize you're no longer asking others for permission to exist." Applause erupted, not thunderous, but deep, resonant, healing. After the talk, a line formed. Attendees came forward not just to congratulate, but to connect. A young man said he'd been estranged from his brother for 5 years and was inspired to reach out. A woman in tears thanked Marcus for voicing the weight of generational expectation. "You helped me name something I've felt all my life," she said. "Thank you for showing it's okay to let go." That night, Marcus returned to his apartment overlooking Central Park. The city sparkled below like a living constellation. Derek poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to Marcus. "Well," Derek said, leaning on the balcony railing, "you're officially a public figure now. Think you'll survive the attention?" Marcus chuckled. "Surviving is what I did in the dark. Now I'm just living." Derek raised his glass. "To light, and to building your own." Marcus clinked his glass gently. "To no longer needing anyone else's." They stood in silence for a moment, not the awkward kind, the kind that follows peace. Down below, life continued, cars, footsteps, stories in motion. But up here, Marcus felt still, rooted, not in others' expectations, not in guilt or resentment, but in himself. The next morning, headlines began surfacing. CEO behind Miami's quiet rebirth shares his story. Messages poured into the Meridian inbox, requests for interviews, partnerships, even mentorships, but Marcus didn't rush. He reviewed each one slowly, knowing which paths aligned with his values. His team grew not in size, but in depth. People who resonated with his vision, not chasing clout, but clarity. He also received a card in the mail, handwritten from Lorraine. "I watched your talk. I finally see you. And I'm sorry." He read it twice, then placed it in a drawer, not to forget, but to remember how far he had come. The final scene of Marcus's journey wasn't a viral moment or a press headline. It was quieter, stronger. It was a man finally visible to himself and to the world on his terms. A week after the TEDx talk, Marcus received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a handwritten note from a former staff member at the Meridian Grand Hotel, someone who had once been publicly humiliated by Brandon during one of his many influencer meltdowns. "Thank you," the note read, "for creating a place where people like me were seen even when others tried to erase us. I never got to say it, but the way you quietly handled that situation, it meant everything." Marcus placed the letter beside Lorraine's card on his desk. 2 small pieces of paper, each humble in form, yet more powerful than any accolade he had ever received. They were the kind of acknowledgments that couldn't be bought, only earned through authenticity. In the days that followed, whispers circulated about Brandon. He had disappeared from the digital spotlight, no posts, no vlogs, no partnerships. Word spread that he'd moved to a quiet town in the Pacific Northwest, perhaps to escape the wreckage or perhaps to rebuild in solitude. Marcus never investigated. He had no interest in shadowing Brandon's next chapter. Whatever Brandon had to learn, life would teach him. It wasn't Marcus's burden to bear. Instead, Marcus returned his focus to the things he could control: his staff, his vision, and his peace. He began hosting quiet leadership retreats at Meridian locations, choosing to mentor young professionals who reminded him of himself. Brilliant, overlooked, burning for direction. He wasn't loud about it. He didn't want credit. He just wanted to give what he once never received. One evening, sitting by the window in his New York office, Marcus poured himself a glass of wine. The skyline glittered like a field of stars below, and for the first time in decades he felt still. Not because the world had finally applauded, but because he had nothing left to prove. He reached for the leather journal he'd been keeping since his Miami days. Its pages were worn, filled with moments of doubt, hope, and fierce resilience. With deliberate strokes, he penned a final entry. "I don't need to win against them. I only need not to lose myself." He closed the journal softly. There was no underline, no signature flourish, just a breath, a pause, a chapter closing. The following morning, Marcus walked the halls of Meridian's New York flagship. Staff greeted him not with awe but with warmth. Not because he was the CEO, but because he was Marcus, a man who listened, a man who remembered their names, a man who led with presence. One young concierge newly hired asked him during a casual chat, "Mr. Bennett, you've built all this and kept so quiet. Don't you ever want to shout it from the rooftops?" Marcus chuckled, sipping his coffee. "I didn't build this to be seen. I built it so others could stand taller." Derek, standing nearby, smiled. "So you're not hiding anymore?" Marcus turned to him. "I was never hiding. I was creating my own light." "That's different." In the weeks that followed, Meridian Properties launched a new initiative focused on wellness and mental health support for employees. It was Marcus's idea, born from years of silent battles he never wanted anyone else to fight alone. Emails poured in, testimonials from staff across the country thanking him not for a G but for making them feel human. Marcus read each one, quietly, gratefully. The final scene of his journey wasn't marked by a trophy or spotlight. It was this, a man walking through his own legacy, not chasing applause but embodying peace. He had lived a life no longer hidden. And in doing so, he had given others permission to do the same. Because success wasn't about making others regret. It was about waking up each morning and knowing without a doubt you are exactly where you're meant to be. And that, Marcus thought, was the only victory that ever mattered.